look back on a game that I'm sure is special in many Packers fans' hearts, and that is the 2003 game in Oakland against the Raiders, the day after Brett Favre's dad, Irv Favre, had passed away. And there are so many things that go into this game, especially going back and watching it, and all the different scenarios that had to potentially play out for you guys to make the playoffs. So I just want to take a step back first, Tausch, and look at this 2003 season, because you guys had lost on Thanksgiving in Detroit to send the record to 6-6. And obviously not the season I think you were expecting to have. You end up rattling off all these wins in a row to eventually get in, get the miracle from the Cardinals that we could talk about later in the last game of the season as well. But what do you remember about that 2003 team kind of leading up to before that game, before you guys got the news that Irv had passed?
You know what? I think it was, we started off slow, which we had done, a year before too. So I think there's always that we just believed in each other. And as seasons go, you always kind of work through adversity and you try and kind of figure out what your team is going to be. And we knew that we were a really good running football team. Amon Green sets all the records that year. And, offensive line wise, we were very confident in our abilities as far as how we approached it and what we did. And we just always felt like just keep going. If you continue to win, and even though we had some hiccups and we, started slow, that we had a good football team. And I think as the season continued to progress and our defense continued to get better and better, Javon Walker, we just felt like there was a lot of things that were going in the right direction for us as a football team. And then, we get to this game and not really understand. We knew that we needed to win. And then, we fly out there and everything is the same. It's normal. You go get dinner. And then we kind of hear the news. And then there's all this uncertainty. And it was from an emotional standpoint, it made me reaffirm the belief on how important chemistry and team and being a part of a team and picking up a teammate when they're down. It is the most memorable football game that I played in as a Green Bay Packer.
How did you guys find out? Because the stories are out there of how Brett found out, like Deanna trying to get a hold of Brett, finally gets a hold of Doug Peterson. He lets Brett know. How did you guys as a team find out? And then how did Brett address you? Because that was addressed a couple of times in the broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all at the hotel. We had gotten back from dinner or, whatever, and we were getting ready to go down for our, we do an offensive meeting and then we do the team meeting. And, word spread pretty quickly that something had happened. And then we, some of us stopped over and just wanted to, give Brett condolences in the hotel. I think he probably had 100 things going on. And as a teammate, you just want to make sure that, that your teammate that's down knows that you're there for them and however that might go. And then probably the most powerful team meeting that I think I ever was a part of. And that was, we went down and, everybody was talking about it. It was, trying to figure out if Brett was going to come, if he was going to play. And as we were sitting in that meeting room, the emotions that came out and how important it was. I think the fact that Brett knew his dad would want him to play, that it was an honor to him, and that we just needed to be there to pick him up. And that was the whole, I guess, and to encompass it, it was just a great feeling of team and what can we do to help a teammate that is just going through one of the toughest things he'll go through in his whole life. How can we help and make that easier for him? And as a team, how can we overcome and do something big? That was the main, I guess, vibe or theme that I can remember coming out of that team meeting.
The problem is, okay, so you had the team meeting, but now you're not playing till Monday night. Mm-hmm. What were the feelings? What were the vibes kind of heading into the game before Brett started doing what Brett did that night?
There was just a lot of emotion. I can't imagine everything that Brett was going through, but I think there was a collective, let's go win this game. Let's go do this for Brett because he is our brother and he is hurting. And the best thing that you can do is go out and honor his dad by playing good football and helping him in a small way. It's not going to overcome all of the grief that he's feeling, but at least for that moment, when he's going to fly back and go through all of the planning and, the funeral and everything else. As a team, let's do everything we can. And I just felt like, the Oakland fans cheering for Brett Favre, understanding it, that's rare. That whole place, it just felt like it was one of those games that you knew as a player in that locker room we were going to win. Like I would have bet, you just knew that we were going to get it done.
How unexpected. You mentioned the Oakland fans cheering for Brett, which again, Oakland, black hole, like very intense place to play typically. Now the Raiders, they were having an off season. They had gone to the Super Bowl the year before, had some injuries. Rick Myers started this game at quarterback, after Gannon had gotten hurt throughout the course of the season. It was a roster that was getting a little bit older. So the Raiders fans were having a disappointing season. But like the one, I think it was, our prayers are for you, Brett. Like just the simplest sign. I remember that as clear as day watching that game. Obviously was shown in the replay, watching it back as well. How shocking was it when he started running through the line and he more or less got a standing ovation from the visiting team?
Yeah, it was surprising because, you'd heard stories and, you remember the images of the dude with the shoulder pads and the spikes coming out of it.
Yeah.
Just people foaming at the mouth coming to get you. And the, I guess, compassion and empathy that you saw that night, you knew it was bigger than just a game of football. And that reiterated, I know the chills were running down all of us when that happened. And again, it just kind of reiterated that unity that we had in our group. That was, this is going to be a respite for Brett, and we're going to win this football game. And then once the game actually started, you knew as you were seeing things, balls getting thrown up and guys making great catches, it reaffirmed all of those feelings that I think most of us in our locker room had.
So that opening drive that you had offensively that ends in a Wesley Walls touchdown, a couple of things stood out to me. First, you were called for a false start penalty that you seem to be shaking your head at. Did you jump? Did you move? What happened there?
Yeah, I forget all of those. I didn't move. I'm sure the ref made a bad call.
Yeah, that's what it's. But so going back and watching it versus what my memory of it was, like my memory was it was a lot of just ridiculous things. Like when Javon came down in triple coverage, he had another one with double coverage just short of the end zone. But a lot of it was like Brett just being incredibly sharp. Yeah, there were some tight windows, but the first touchdown pass that he had to Wesley Walls, like I don't think that gets appreciated as one of Brett's best throws, because there was a very small window that he could drop it in over the backer to the back corner. Oh, and by the way, he's rolling to his left. Like it was the thing that stood out to me most was it wasn't ridiculous play after ridiculous play by the receiver. It was just Brett, especially early, being incredibly sharp.
Yeah, I think Brett, again, it takes a special player to be able to kind of compartmentalize and go out and do. I think he was really looking at this as he wanted to honor his dad. And I think he wanted to have a big game. And I think the receivers, the linemen, we understood that and wanted to make sure that happened. So I remember Wesley Walls was his last year. He was not moving like he did. I mean, he was a great tight end. And for him to make that diving catch where Brett, again, I do think the story is better when you can say that all of us rose up our games, which is true. But I do think part of it is that, Brett really elevated his game too. And that throw he made to Wesley Walls was absolutely perfectly thrown. And understanding Wesley to be able to dive, to make that catch, that set the tone for what we kind of figured was going to happen. Again, belief is such a strong thing. And our group believed. And then when you get some validation early with a touchdown drive right out of the gates, it just felt like it was going to be Steamroll City, and that's kind of how it ended up playing.
Well, yeah, they scored a touchdown in the first half, but it didn't matter. It was all about what you guys were doing on offense. And the other thing I forgot was, like, you guys were 4 for 4 on, like, 3rd and 11 to start the game. Like, first and second down didn't go well, and then you would just pull out a big play, give Brett enough time, and it was – so you had Wesley Walls involved. Antonio Freeman, I completely forgot he was back on the team in 2003, and he was making plays. But then you have, some of the older generation like those guys, but then you had Javon Walker and even some sprinkling in of Donald Driver, who made some big plays in that game.
Yeah, you were mentioning a couple of those throws, and I can remember, and I don't know if it was second or third quarter, but Brett was throwing some balls up, and Javon came down with one on triple coverage, and we were as linemen, you kind of jog or sprint up to the line of scrimmage, and basically we just said to the D lineman, man, it's not, this is our night, this is going to be a long night for you guys, and I think they, acknowledging that you just knew with some of the plays and some of it was, I don't want to say it was outworldly because we've seen Brett make these throws, but some of the plays that Javon made and the Wesley Wallace catch, there were some things
Robert Ferguson.
Ferg, there were some things that were extraordinary. It wasn't just the routine, seam throws. It was next level. And it was, guys, I think there's, divine intervention might be strong, but it did feel like there was some magic in the air that night. And guys were doing things that maybe they hadn't done consistently. Maybe they always could do it. They didn't know they could do it. But guys were just making unbelievable plays. And Brett was putting it where they could do that. And it was the perfect marriage of just kind of a magical night that I think all of us that were a part of it will never forget.
So that's what you just kind of looked at the defense. Was it like apologetic? Like, hey, sorry, man, this is just our night. Like it was
not apologetically. It was just, this is what was happening. I mean,
yeah.
The Wesley catch, and then I don't remember when Javon made that great catch. There, I think Drive made one that was great too.
Yep.
And it was just kind of acknowledging, hey man, you guys, this is not going to be your night. It's our night. This is going to be a Green Bay Packer kind of game. And I just remember every time we'd come off, everybody hugging Brett, and it was, really just trying to understand the circumstances and still go out there and executing the game plan at probably one of the highest levels I've seen from a teammate, understanding what was needed, and then we went out and executed it.
Was there much said in the game, or was it just kind of all understood when you'd hug Brett on the sideline, or he'd went back? I think there's a famous, part of the clips that I remember is him looking up to Deanna as she was up in one of the boxes before she eventually came down toward the end of the game. Was it just kind of all understood, or was anything ever said once you got on the field?
It was definitely more than just an understood. I mean, you don't go after a touchdown in the first quarter and go give big, long, meaningful hugs to guys. It's more, all right, hey, great job, dap up, go back and look at the sheets and study what happened. There was more emotion that was tied into this than any other game I played in, and the fact that I can remember Flanny giving Brett a big hug after the first one, and then Mike Wall doing something, and all of us just wanting to, embrace the moment of what was going on and make sure Brett knew we were all, and not that he needed it, but it was one of those things I think we all were trying to figure out the right thing. And it wasn't a bunch of words that needed to be said. It was more about the actions, and then just letting Brett know that we were here if he needed us.
Was that kind of understood between you guys without saying anything to Brett, or was that something you guys talked about in all the time in the run up you had to the game?
I mean, I think we all were, understanding of what the circumstance, what circumstances we were in, and to make sure that we were there for our quarterback, whatever that needed to be. If it was a hug, if it was, cracking a joke, whatever it might be, just let's be there. And obviously Marco is really good friends with Brett, and they had a tight bond off the field too. So we kind of we didn't want to do anything that was, I guess out of step, but we just wanted to make sure that he knew that we were there. It was just different than any other game that I played in.
Now, the 2003 season, I thought ended up being a pretty special season, not just because of this, but because of what happened then the last game of the regular season as well. And something that I think maybe gets overlooked. So this was a Monday night game, and then Brett had to go and deal with all of the family stuff and the funeral. I mean, what were the emotions like the following week? Because it was still so fresh. Irv had passed away that Sunday. He played on Monday. What was it like in that week leading up to then that final game of the regular season, a must win for you against the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, I mean, I think we didn't. It was a lot of times there's a letdown after a big win, especially when you start talking about the emotions. Then you have the long flight home, and it's a quick turnaround for, I think we played a Sunday afternoon game at Lambeau, and it just felt like we were kind of riding that wave. And Brett needed to go do what he needed to do. I don't even remember what day he came back to practice, but we knew he'd be dialed in. And I think we as a group decided, that was going to be, hey, we're going to take as much off his plate because obviously he had a lot going on. So we ran the ball great against Denver. I can remember Ahman Green with I think the longest rush in the history of the Green Bay Packers.
Mm-hmm.
And how that all played out, I think it was just more, again, we were really feeling, and I think that's why, the 4th and 26 and everything that played out and the disappointment, because we all felt like we were really coming together as a group and had a great team that should and was capable of doing great things. And that game against Denver, none of us knew what was happening. And legitimately, there was not it was cell phones, but not to any of the degree we're at now. And we didn't know, and we didn't want to know, because we just said we can only do what we do. We knew we felt really good about beating Denver, and we didn't know all of the other scenarios that had played out throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, so the biggest one there was the Vikings taking on the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. And I was at that game. I was a senior in high school, did whatever I could. I sat by myself. Me and 4 other buddies went up. We 2 of my buddies sat together. The other 2 of us were able to find single tickets, just off the street. And we were sitting there. And I mean, the Broncos didn't have anything to play for, and they had sat a lot of the guys, whatever. You guys blew out the Broncos that day. You just kicked, and Sherman didn't want the score on the Jumbotron. So even as fans, I had a phone, but it's not like I had the ESPN app on the phone. I remember looking back for the last 5 minutes of the game, looking for some reaction from fans that were sitting in the boxes and had access to TVs and knew what scores were. What were you guys doing? Because at that point the game was over. I don't even know if you were in the game at that point because it was such a blowout against the Broncos.
Yeah. I think honestly, and this sounds crazy, especially now with attention spans, but I legitimately said, there's nothing we can do about any of the other stuff. I didn't know there was a bunch of games that needed to go our way that didn't earlier in the day. And it was more, let's just go win and it'll work out. I think we really felt like it was going to work itself out. And had I known the dire straits we'd have been in, I would have probably been bummed. So I don't know if you could still pull this off in today's day and age. But I remember doing the same things that a young Gabe Neitzel sitting at Lambeau Field. We came off the sounds and we're kind of looking up, what the hell's going on? And when you heard the roar, when old boy was ruled that he ended up catching the touchdown pass, Poole. His name was Poole.
Nathan Poole got a key to the city. Got a key to the city of Green Bay.
It gave us an opportunity. So none of us had a clue. We're sitting there, and it's one of the weirdest things. But everybody's just looking up in the luxury suite, saying, "Give us some info." The trainers weren't dialed in. It wasn't games on phones yet. We couldn't really tell, and if they did, they wouldn't tell us anyways. So we had no clue. And then finally, at the end of the game, when everything kind of broke, we knew we had caught the break that we needed to get in the playoffs. But prior to that, none of us had a clue what the heck was going on. I feel fairly confident in saying that.
Yeah, it was I was going crazy because I assumed something good had happened. I didn't know it was, Poole getting a foot down, ruled that he was pushed out of bounds. I didn't know how crazy that game was. And then I just remember on the Jumbotron, as your game hit zeros, they flashed up there the graphic, Green Bay Packers 2003 NFC North champs, and then the place just went up for grabs. To meet up with my friends, I remember I had to go to the other side of the stadium. Everybody's giving high fives, everybody was giving hugs. That was, and I know you're on the Super Bowl team, and I know, as you mentioned, 2003 ended up having disappointment, but that was, again, I just feel with everything that had happened over the course of those 2 weeks, and then you had the Al Harris, Hasselbeck, we're going to take the ball, we're going to score game the following week on the wild card at Lambeau Field. The 2003 team is one of my favorite teams just because of the way everything had played out for you guys and the way you guys were resilient every step of the way. Do you kind of feel similar about that 2003 team in terms of your career?
Yeah, it was one of my favorite teams because obviously as a group, offensive line wise, we were incredibly tight, and it was, we worked through a lot of stuff and we were really good. Our run blocking and what we were able to do on the ground that year, it's special. And so you go through those types of seasons and it always comes back to, who were you with? Is it the guy? And that was a special group that I have a lot of love for. It was just a great, fun season that unfortunately, there's only one team that's happy at the end of seasons typically. And we had a lot of and all, the game that we were talking about, obviously that Denver game, and then how everything played out. It was a roller coaster of emotions that was a ton of fun to be a part of.
You mentioned chemistry right at the outset of the podcast, Tausch. Is there another team that you feel had the type of chemistry that this one had? And I know you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but without that chemistry, are you able to work your way through some of the adversity that you went through, even just outside of a slow start and then Irv passes? Without that chemistry, do you guys get to where you got to that year?
No, I don't. I think it's so difficult to win in this league as it is, and then when you start adding all these other things up, getting off to a slow start in the NFL is really hard because you have a ton of things working against you, and the margin for error to regroup is really tough. And then you have guys mentally, you have to keep guys together, and that was what was so great about really in 01, 02, 03, 04. That's 4 seasons. We ended up starting slow in a lot of them. And it was resilience. It was the fact that we would stick together. And when times would get tough is when you needed to show up the most. And I always thought that group, those teams, we always found ways to fight and to give ourselves a chance you just want to get in the postseason. And we were able to do that. And then you let kind of the chips fall where they may. And, unfortunately, we never got over the hump with those groups, but we accomplished a bunch, and the journey of getting to where we were was never easy. And I think you always remember those seasons that you're able to fight and overcome some things and position yourself. You guys take a lot of pride in that. I know I do.
Tausch, I want to say thank you so much, man, for jumping on, talking about that team, that season. What is that lasting image that you have before we let you go of that 2003 game in Oakland against the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's what the Wesley Walls catch was always the thing that really, because Wesley, he was at the back end of his career, and to make that play, I thought really set the tone for this going to be a great day as far as being a Green Bay Packer and winning this game. And then it really continues to be a part, whether I'm coaching Little League or doing anything team sports related, that game always illustrates to me how important it is for everybody to be working towards a common goal. And that was highlighted more so in that one night than any time throughout any other sport, throughout any of my athletic career. That night showed you when guys are sacrificing and wanting to put everything out there to win for a greater cause than just your own selfish accomplishments. That night is always the highlight of that, because it was illustrated over and over, whether it was somebody making a key block, somebody making a great catch, going above and beyond for your teammates. When you can do that, you have big time success. And that game always will illustrate that to me.
Tausch, we always appreciate it. It is certainly a game that has a special spot in Packers fans' hearts and memories. The 2003 game against the Raiders in Oakland on Monday Night Football. And it was great to listen to Al Michaels, John Madden do the call of that game as well, because you know how much of a fan Madden was of Brett Favre. Appreciate it, Tausch.
You bet. Thanks, Gabe.
That is Mark Tauscher. Make sure you tune in next week as we continue to go through some of these historic Packer games on RePackables, all part of Packed Summer here on ESPN.